Carete mathetai. Like the fearless Argonauts who ventured so audaciously into the realm of the unknown, we too, as our own band of heroes, will bravely venture into the world of Thucydides. Great challenges undoubtedly await us, though. Unexpected discrepancies will lure us into states of uncertainty. Curious manipulations of language will guide us down the wrong paths. Golden grasshoppers in the hair of the Athenians will have us questioning everything. But we will prevail. As we stumble through the archaic density of Thucydides, we too, like the Argonauts, will find comfort on our own island of Lemnos, as the familiar declensions and conjugations of Athanaste will welcome us with open arms, providing to us a moment of breath and reassurance that we can do this. As we endure with fluctuating spirits the hardships Thucydides has to offer, we will find more and more of these moments of comfort. I promise you that. The substitution of nouns for verbs and verbs for nouns will peck at our brains like the Stymphalian birds. The impression of solecism, deceitful as ever, will attempt to cease our quest towards success. But our determination and our perseverance, like a white dove let loose by a skillful sailor, will fly unscathed through the crashing rocks of uncertainty. Our challenges in reading Thucydides will be persistent and laborious, but we will endure with good cheer the challenges before us, and with our resilience, and with our determination, we will conquer the adversity placed before us. As a wise man once said, Kratis toi danten sukien dikaios krithean, oitate dena kai heidea, safestata kignos contes, kai diatauta me apotrepomenoi, ekton kindunon. Okay, having removed the Periclean spirit from my soul, I will now call upon the great teacher Chiron to be my guide as I lead us through Book 1, Chapter 6 of Thucydides. Before we dive into Chapter 6, something I find always aids my translation is having in the back of my mind what just happened in the previous chapters. I think background information and context play key roles in any attempts to translate these ancient authors, because there are such curious manipulations of language and grammatical ambiguities that might throw us off. So being familiar with anything that we can be familiar with before throwing ourselves into battle, I think is beneficial. Thus, let us recap the first 5 chapters of Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War.
Previously on
Thucydides begins our journey by firmly asserting his belief, in the most unromanticized, non-exaggerated manner, speaking the truest words to have ever been spoken, that this would be the greatest conflict that Greece had ever seen. For the preparations of both sides were in every regard a state of perfection, and the people from all over the Greek world were joining themselves to one side or the other. Although, a long time ago, the Greek world was feeble and unstable, for there was no trade neither by land or sea, and the colonies were unfortified, the soil infertile, and a great fear of foreign attack loomed to the earth. Thus migration was of great occurrence. And for this reason, there was no prosperity, no unification. It was a world of isolation, except for Attica, a region free from the infertile soil, who saw no form of migration, thus had been inhabited since the beginning of time by the same people. And in Athens, the men of migration saw the prosperity they had never seen before. With rises in citizenship, Athens sent out colonies to Ionia. And then, when travel between the islands and the mainland began, they turned themselves to piracy to support their livelihood. It was a time of thieves lurking in the waters, unprotected settlements being plundered, and poets asking way too many questions. But such methods of livelihood were necessary at the time, and they were not considered dishonorable. And even today, many parts of Greece remain bearing arms, remembering the days of pirates, plundered villages, and poets. Okay, now I'm finally going to take you through how I do my translations. So what I've done here is I've broken up the chapter into sections. So we're looking at section 1 of chapter 6. There's 6 sections in total. And that's how we're going to work through this chapter, section by section. I think it's the easiest way to do it. The Perseus project already has it broken into sections, which is nice for when I'm printing out the chapter onto paper. The Thesaurus Linguae Graecae does as well, but the Loeb library doesn't. So if you're using the Loeb library, just know it doesn't cut it into sections. Sometimes I even go further, and I'll break the section up into sentences, so I'll only have 1 sentence per page. We don't necessarily have to do that for this section, because it is rather small, but really, we're working sentence by sentence anyways. It's just the difference would be you'll see once we get to section 3, it's rather large and it can be quite daunting, so sometimes it's easier to only look at one sentence per page or at a time. But for this one, it's small, so we're looking at the whole thing. Okay, first thing that I do is I parse. I parse everything. I start with what I know, I move on to what I think I know, and then I work through what I don't know or what I think I don't know. And I always have with me references to noun declension charts and verb conjugation charts, because as important as it is to be familiar with these patterns of declensions and conjugations and to have them in the back of our minds, there's a lot, and I think having them at arm's reach away at all times is important, and so I always have them with me at all times. And then once I've parsed everything that I know, I look to the commentaries and I use resources like Thesaurus Linguae Graecae to help me parse what I've never seen before, what I think I don't know. Even though it might be something that I know, it's just a certain way that the author has used it. Because there are lots of irregularities and grammar components that are unique to certain authors that we just aren't familiar with until we start reading these authors. So these resources are always good to have. Okay, boom, right off the bat, Island of Lemnos. We know this. We've seen both the pronoun and the noun before. So, boom, we know those. Okay, moving on to the next verb. I see the epsilon at the beginning telling me it's imperfect. I wasn't familiar with the ending, so I looked to the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae, and it told me that it's an indicative, active, third-person singular. I skip the prepositions. I move on to the adjective, which is a masculine accusative plural. I move on to the noun, which is a feminine accusative plural. Keep going. Another adjective, feminine accusative plural again. And then I get to this pronoun, which is also accusative plural. And then finally, another adjective, which is masculine accusative plural. So just right there, we've got a string of accusatives, which makes it fun. Then I move on, and we've got another adjective, which is a feminine accusative singular. And then we have a feminine accusative singular noun and a genitive plural noun and another verb. Boom, another Island of Lemnos. We know this verb, we know this stem, we know that the epsilon at the beginning and the sigma in the middle is telling us it's aorist, and the ending tells us it's indicative middle third person plural. Great, another Island of Lemnos in the first section. That's brilliant. And then masculine nominative plural noun. So there we go. The parsing is done. Okay, so we have everything parsed, and I've put up some the translations that I've come up with, and now I'm going to walk you through how we make a coherent translation sentence out of this. So first we look at our subjects, which are the nominative singular at the beginning here. Now this is actually, it means like the people of Hellas, meaning like the Greeks. So for all the Greeks, and then we look at a verb, which we know is a third person singular, so we know it's belonging to our subject there. That goes together. For all the Greeks, were bearing arms. This is a verb that means like to bear iron or to go armed. So they were bearing arms. And then we go to our preposition dia here. Now dia, it means because of, on account of, through. I have because here. It's actually doing two different jobs, in my opinion. I think it's doing two different jobs. I think dia is connecting this string of accusatives to they were bearing arms because, like, why they were bearing arms. But I also think that dia is connected to accessibility because that's an adjective, but I think in this case Thucydides is using it as a noun. So rather than because, it means through accessibility, meaning their communications. So we'll see dia is connecting all of this, but it's also being used with the accessibility. So sure, I'm gonna highlight all of that in blue. So the Greeks were bearing arms because, and then this task is connecting all of this together. But we see the te and the kai, and we know that's both and. That's another Island of Lemnos. So because both the settlements and our adjective, the settlements were unprotected, and we go back to the dia, through accessibility, so meaning communications, so because both the settlements were unprotected and communications to others were not unsafe, meaning they weren't safe. That's why they were bearing arms. So that's we've got our first sentence. For all the Greeks were bearing arms because both the settlements were unprotected and communications to others were not safe. And then we'll go to our next sentence. And we've got the barbarians there. That's our nominative plural, right? And we have the verb right there. That's third person plural. Okay, are the barbarians performing the verb? Maybe. I think the Greeks are performing the verb, okay? Because it is the people of Hellas, right? It is the people of Greece, people being plural. So, for the Greeks were bearing arms because both the settlements were unprotected and communications to others were unsafe, and they were doing, I want yellow, they were doing, the accusative, they were doing this habitual way of life. That's what, no, maybe we'll do purple. That's what this means. This habitual way of life with tools meaning, in this case, the iron, the arms, right? It's both iron tools and iron armor. So, they were doing this habitual way of life with armor, just as the barbarians, back to the verb, we're also doing. So there we have our whole sentence. So we can, if I can figure out how to do this. Oh, there we go. Cool. Brilliant. Okay, so for all the Greeks, were bearing arms. Okay. Because both the settlements, I just realized you could probably hear me typing. I don't know what to do about it. I'm not restarting this. Both the settlements were unprotected, and communications to others were unsafe. And they were doing, the Greeks were doing this way of life with tools, meaning they were bearing arms, just like the barbarians. Spelling is not my forte. Just like the barbarians were doing. Bingo, bango, bongo. That is our sentence. And now we're going to do the same thing with section 2. So we're going to parse everything, translate everything individually, again, relying on those conjugation charts and the declension charts and resources that we have available to us. And then we will color code everything based on each individual word's function in the sentence, and then form a full translation. All right, let's parse. Let's see what we got. So we got a neuter nominative noun. It could be accusative. I argue it's nominative, and I argue it's nominative because if we skip ahead to the pronoun, that's a neuter nominative plural. Now, Thucydides uses this plural in the singular sense, and if we back up, boom, another island of Lemnos. We know this verb. That's a third-person singular verb. So I argue that both of those, the noun and the pronoun, are nominative singular because they are, the verb is about them. But I could be wrong. Anyways, it's fine. And then we have a feminine genitive singular. Skip over the prepositions. We have another verb. This is a participle. It's a nominative present, middle passive, plural. Skip over the prepositions. We have Pantes, which we know that's another island of Lemnos. Beautiful. That's a masculine accusative plural. And then we have an adjective, which is a genitive plural, and a genitive plural noun. Okay, now we'll color code. Do the same thing as before. Okay, so we'll look at our, let me grab my highlighter. We'll look at our subjects, which I convincingly argued were these guys, and our verb, because it's third person singular, and these are our subjects, and they're singular, even though this guy appears plural. I think he's being used singular. Thucydides does that. He uses singular for the plural, or plural for the singular quite a bit. Anyways, and this is, at least that's what I read, and this is the proof. And then that's its own thing, right? He's referring back to what he just said, and this is how he's starting it. So we could even put, like, I don't think it'll let me, but, well, yeah, okay. A little colon there, but just that for right now. And this is the proof. And then we have this genitive because it's the people of Hellas, like I kind of said before, but this is an actual genitive. So, and this is the proof that the Greeks, and I'm actually going to, that's our subject here, even though it's in the genitive. That's our subject of this sentence, because it's, right, the people of Greece. Anyways, the Greeks, then we go here, that's our verb, which belongs to this, because again, as I argued, the people is plural, and they're the nominative subject of the country, which is in the genitive. So that's that. They were maintaining themselves, and then we have all of these like prepositions and pronouns and whatnot. So how do we figure this out? Okay, well, the Greeks were maintaining themselves in this way. Here, let me do this. They were maintaining themselves in this way, still, telling us about the time. And then we're like, oh no, we don't have another verb. Okay, well, what if I told you that this guy is a noun substituted for a verb? Thucydides also does that. He substitutes nouns for verbs and verbs for nouns. Like I told you, like the Stymphalian birds. I think that's the reference I made. Anyways, so we're going to add our own sort of verb there. So the Greeks were maintaining themselves in this way still, and continuing, they were maintaining, they were doing, we'll use maintaining, and they were maintaining a custom similar to all, a custom of such a time. The custom of before, they were maintaining a custom which was similar to everyone. So that's kind of messy. Let's make a sentence a translation out of it. Okay, and yeah, you're gonna hear me type. And this is the proof, or maybe, and the proof is this. Either one works. And this is the proof that the Greeks were maintaining, oh goodness. There we go. Themselves. Selves. In this way, still. They were still maintaining themselves in this way. You could do either one. And they were maintaining, they were doing, they were continuing a custom which is maintaining a custom similar to all of such time. Meaning of before. So the sentence it's not great English, but the gist of it is that this is the proof. The Greeks were maintaining themselves in this way still today, and they were maintaining a custom which of the time before was similar to all. So that's that. And now we're at section 3. As I said before, and as you can see, it's larger than the last two that we did. So I think it's easier for me, and I think it'll just be easier. I think it's a good method for anyone to use if we just split it up into sentence by sentence. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to follow the same process I'm going to parse all of the words. I'm going to give you the translations that I came up with, and then we'll color code the function of each word and create a translation. Although I know it is most riveting to watch me parse each word individually, for this section and for the remaining sections, I will just put all of my parsing up on one slide with the translations that I've come up with, and we'll walk through them together during the color coding stage. Okay, so we have everything parsed and we have individual translations. Let's see how everything works together. So we're going to color code. Immediately, we're looking for our subject. We have a noun right here that's nominative plural. Boom, our subject, the Athenians. And then, do we have anything describing the Athenians? Yeah, we have an adjective. The first. Okay, cool. The first Athenians. Yeah, but we have this dative in front of them, which means in them, or sounds better in English as among them. So, the Athenians, and then you have to supply a verb to be, so in the past, or in the imperfect rather, the Athenians were the first among them. Among them. So, the Athenians were the first among them, and then you also have to supply who. The Athenians were the first among them who, and then we're looking for our verb. Do we have a verb? Boom, third person plural. So the Athenians were the first among them who laid down, and then we're looking for an accusative. We see our accusative, boom, who laid down their arms, meaning their weapons. The Athenians were the first among them who laid down their weapons. Okay, do we have any more verbs for the Athenians? Okay, well that's a verb, it's a participle, but it's dative singular, so it's not with the Athenians, so we go down here, boom, another verb. Because it's third person plural. So, the Athenians were the first among them who laid down their arms, kai, and changed what? We're looking for an accusative. Changed, we've got that preposition, to more luxurious things or ways. It's an adjective, it's a comparative adjective, and it's accusative. So, the Athenians were the first among them who laid down their arms and changed to more luxurious ways. But then we have these datives in the middle. How do we add those in? Well, those that construction rather, is a dative of manner. So you have to supply the word, or the preposition, by. So the Athenians were the first among them who laid down their arms and changed to more luxurious things by giving up their way of living. So let's get our little text guy over here. Okay. The Athenians were the first among them who laid down their arms, and by giving up their way of living, changed to more luxurious ways. Boom, we've got it. Okay, section 3.2. You know the drill by now. We'll parse everything individually, come up with individual translations, and then color code to form a translation. Okay, you know what we do first? We look for our nominative subject. So we know, let's make sure we're on yellow. Here's our subject here because of the ending, right? We know that that's a nominative plural, masculine ending. So that's our subject. And then we come over here and we see this genitive. This genitive, what it's doing in this sentence is it's describing our subject. So we have the elders of wealth, so the wealthy elders. And then we have that dative that we saw before, among them, the wealthy elders among them. And then we'll look for a verb that agrees with our plural subject, and we see that right here. And we know it's aorist because we see the epsilon and we see the sigma. And we know the ending is third person plural. So the wealthy elders among them stopped. And then we see this participle. This participle is modifying, or not modifying, but it's agreeing with the verb before it. So the wealthy elders among them, and it's also agreeing with the wealthy elders. The wealthy elders among them stopped wearing. Then we look for our accusative, which we know is this. So the wealthy elders among them stopped wearing linen tunics. And then we have this whole construction here. So this on its own is an adjective, but the commentaries tell us that it is put with dia to mean on account of the spread of delicate habits. I took this to mean the spread of delicate habits in terms of fashion, so a feminine fashion. Not that I think fashion has a gender or is indicative of a gender, but the Greeks did. Anyways, whatever. And the wealthy elders among them, on account of the spread of delicate habits, stopped wearing linen tunics. Okay, but then we also have this, right? This is a construction of time. So, not much time when, indeed, is what I understood that to be. So I made that up to mean not until recent times. I also looked at the commentary for help on that. And the wealthy elders among them, on account of the spread of delicate habits, not until recent times, stopped wearing linen tunics. Okay. Let's look for, we have this kai, so we know there's more to this. Is there a verb? There is. So there's a participle. And we know because of the ending that it's nominative plural, so we know it's about the elders. And also the ending tells us that it's middle passive. So the wealthy elders among them, on account of the spread of delicate habits, not until recent times, stopped wearing linen tunics. And then we go back to this verb, stopped binding. Then we look for our accusative, which I'm going to do in blue also. Stopped binding a knot. And then do we have anything describing that knot? Yeah, we have more genitives, right? So, golden ornaments, grasshoppers. So, golden grasshopper ornaments. Then we have these datives. What do we do with those datives? Okay, whoops. So, they stopped binding knots, golden grasshopper ornament knots, or a knot of golden ornament grasshoppers in the head, or on their head, upon their heads, within their heads, although it's singular, so within their head. And then I think this dative is a dative of means, so by means of fastening it in their head. So what we have there is, let's make a sentence out of this. And the wealthy elders among them, on account of the spread of delicate habits, not until recent times, stopped wearing linen tunics and stopped binding. I guess we don't need that period there, but it helps me. And stopped binding a knot of golden grasshoppers, golden grasshopper ornaments within their heads. And I'm going to make it plural just for the translation's sake. By means of fastening it to their head. There we have it. Another translation. Okay, so we have section 3.3 here with the parsing and the individual translations, and now we'll try and make a translation out of it. So immediately we're looking for our subject. Our subject in the sentence is all the way at the end, so it's actually this feminine nominative noun right here, the fashion. So this fashion. And then we have the verb, aorist indicative active third person singular. Now, a lot of the translations have this verb in the passive. So this fashion was laid down, but we can see very clearly that it's not in the passive. So that's where this gets a little difficult. So what I do, took this, and from where, and this is referring back to the previous section 3.1 and section 3.2 that we just did, and it's talking about the Athenians. So this is the Athenians. So this fashion from the Athenians, so the Athenians laid down this fashion, and then we look for our accusative, which is right here. They laid it down to the elders of Ionia. So this is all one thing, right? This is modifying the elder, or this is describing the elders. So the from where being the Athenians laid down. So I guess we could do this. So the Athenians laid down this fashion to the elders of Ionia, and then we have this. So this is where it got a bit difficult for me, and I had to supply things here and there that aren't in the sentence, but they are in the sentence. So we get, and the Athenians laid down this fashion to the elders of Ionia, and this fashion was laid down, that's implied, by the ancestors being the Athenian ancestors that laid down this fashion, and this fashion long prevailed. So we get this belongs to both this and this, and this belongs to that and that. So at least this is how I've understood it. It's hard to make this sentence. You want to use this verb as a passive, but it's clearly not a passive. So we get, and the Athenians laid down this fashion to the elders of Ionia, and then you have to supply. So this fashion and then we could and the Athenians laid down this fashion to the elders of Ionia. This fashion was laid down by the ancestors, because this means like kin or cognate, right? So I'm just using ancestors. This fashion was laid down by the ancestors, and then we'll do that, and then this fashion long prevailed. And so we have an interpretation of the sentence, and thus a translation. And so with section 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 put together, we get the full section 3, and it looks like this. And now we can move on to section 4, and we'll do the same process again. Okay, section 4. This section is my favorite of this chapter because I struggled a lot with this section, but now that I understand what's going on, it's really fun. So, same thing, we look for the subject. Our subject is the Spartans. And then we have this agreeing with the Spartans, so the Spartans. And it's the same as it was in the other sections. It's not the first Spartans, but it's the Spartans were the first. And then you have to supply who. So the Spartans were the first. Who? Do we have a verb? Yeah, we do right there. It's aorist. We know because, again, of the epsilon and the sigma, and the ending is third person plural, so we know that they belong with the Spartans. So the Spartans were the first who used. And now this verb takes the dative, so we're looking for a dative. Boom, right there. We have our dative. So the Spartans were the first who used, for dative, but actually let's remove that guy, who used a dress, and then we have the adjective, a modern dress. So the Spartans were the first who used a modern dress, and then we have this little construction that I've underlined here already. So we have, it's a lot, right, to look at, and into now, a thing. So it means a thing that even now is modern, right? A modern thing. So the Spartans were the first who used a modern dress, a dress which even now is modern. And then this is really fun, because when I first was doing this, didn't know this was a thing, but that particle, I guess, it signifies that what is about to be said is contrasting what was previously said. So I think that's really cool, because I didn't know that. So the Spartans were the first who used, but on the contrary, the Spartans were the first who used a modern dress, a dress which is still now even modern. Okay? So then we move on. Okay? And then we're ignoring all of this. Just ignore it, because how do you put that together, right? So again, look for, is there a new subject? Maybe. There is. So I'm going to do this one in pink. So we have this article, and then we have this participle. So Thucydides will use participles as nouns, so that's really cool. So this means it means having acquired, and then you have the dative, which also belongs to it. So I'm just gonna keep it in pink. Actually, it might not let me. Oh, there we go. So this is one thing. So having acquired. So those having acquired the most. So what that really means is the rich, the wealthy. So so we have the Spartans were the first, but on the contrary, the Spartans were the first who used a modern dress, a dress which even now is modern, and the wealthy. And then we have this adjective, which is complementing the noun. So the wealthy, living on an equal footing. And then we have the verb for the wealthy. So we'll keep that pink. This is third person plural. So the wealthy living on an equal footing. And then the superlative adverb, especially. And then we can put this construction into the mix, right? So we have our accusative, and then we have another accusative, right? But they're kind of separate accusatives, but together in a way. Okay, so what does this mean? Okay, so because this means towards the majority, into other things. So what we get is, on the contrary, the Spartans were the first who used a modern dress, a dress which is still even now modern, and the wealthy lived on an equal footing, especially as the majority, and in regards to other things. So, or you could do the wealthy especially lived on an equal footing to the majority, and in regards to other things. So, on the contrary, the Spartans were the first who used a dress which even now is modern. Oops. And the wealthy lived, and especially the wealthy, and the wealthy especially lived, I guess you could fit it in there anyway, and the wealthy especially, I really can't spell, so, And the wealthy especially lived on an equal footing to the majority being like the plebes, I guess, the citizens, the masses, to the majority, and in other regards. So the Spartans were the first to use this modern dress, a dress which even now is modern. And the wealthy, Spartans, they especially lived on this equal footing to the majority. They lived equally to the majority. And in other regards, they also did this. Okay, so section 5, like section 3, is larger than the other sections that we've dealt with. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to split it up sentence by sentence, and we're going to do the same process, parse, translate individually, color code, and complete a translation. Okay, section 5.1. So we have our subject. So it's a masculine nominative plural, so they, and then we supply the verb to be. They were the first. And then we look for our verbs for this subject. So we have our verb here. We have an aorist verb, third person plural. We also have a third person plural verb down here, and we have a participle. So that's quite a bit of verbs for this subject. So how are we going to do this? Let's do this. So they were the first who stripped naked, right? And having stripped naked, and then we take our adjective, which is accusative, in public. So having stripped naked publicly, and then we take our next verb. They prepared themselves, because it's middle. They prepared themselves with oil, and then we take the infinitive, to train in gymnastics. So, oh no. We get they were the first to strip, first who, right, we'll keep with the, because it's not in infinitive, who stripped naked, and having publicly stripped naked, they prepared themselves with oil to train in gymnastics. There's no dative for gymnastics. It's implied by the verb. It's what the verb means, to train in gymnastics. Okay, we'll do section 5.2 now, and we'll look for our subject as always, and our subject's down here. It's the athletes, and then we'll look for our verb. So we have a couple verbs. So we have this, our subject is plural, so we have a third person plural verb right here. We also have a plural participle up here, and we have a third person singular verb back here, so we know that that's not with our subject. It is third person, but it's singular, so it's not what we're looking for. So we have the athletes contending, war. So the contending athletes, war, and then we can do our accusative, which is right here. They wore girdles. And then we can, the what's modifying the girdles, or telling us more about the girdles, around their privy parts. And then we have a dative, so where, I guess, this happened, in the Olympic Games. So the athletes, the contending athletes, wore, accusative, girdles, modifying the accusative, or another accusative, around their privy parts, dative, in the Olympic Games. And then we have this construction of telling us about the time, and it's long ago. So long ago, the contending athletes wore girdles around their privy parts in the Olympic Games. And then we have a brand new idea, and so because we have our verb here, we'll do this in green, and we know it's third person singular, it doesn't belong to the athletes. It could be an impersonal it, but in this case, I think it's referring to the custom of wearing the girdles. So it had been stopped, but we can say that custom had been stopped. And then we have, again, a construction of time. So not much time since then, that custom has been stopped. So we can make our sentence, and not long ago, contending athletes, wore girdles around their privy parts in the Olympic Games, and not much time since this custom has been stopped, and it has not been much time since this custom has stopped. Boom. Okay, section 5.3, we look for our subject, but I'm actually going to start us with this verb. We know this verb. This is an island of Lemnos. We know it. It's the verb to be. It's the third person singular. It is. And then we're going to add that guy on there. So it is, and we're talking about the custom that we just talked about in 5.2 of wearing the girdles around the privy parts. So this custom is now, right? We'll do, this is now. And then we take this, still, and also. So this is now and even still. So, and this is even now within the barbarians, right? That's our dative. And then we have another dative over here, those among Asia, and we have an adverb. So we can say, and this custom, even now, is within the barbarians, especially those in Asia. And then what I think we have here is a genitive absolute. So we have well, this is our nominative, prizes, but then we have of boxing and wrestling. So I'm going to say when prizes of boxing and of wrestling, and then we have our middle passive verb, we'll do green, are given, and then we have our nominative over here, meaning this, and it's referring back to our subject over here, the custom, this, and then we have our nominative, what is it called? No, not blue. Participle. Wearing this is done. So altogether we have, although I just gave you a passive translation, so maybe not. And even now this is done within, or let's say by the barbarians, especially those in Asia. And then genitive absolute, I'm saying when prizes of boxing and wrestling are given, because that is passive, wearing this is done. Or maybe if it's third person plural, they do this, they do it wearing this. Yeah, so we stick with what's on the page. They do this, being the custom, wearing this, meaning maybe the girdle. So that's that. Okay. Section 6 of chapter 6. We're almost there. We just got this little bit left. So, again, we look for our subject, which is right here. This is our nominative singular subject, which means a certain thing, a certain someone, but then we have these two things that go with this. So it's not it's going to function as a singular subject, but it's actually plural in its meaning. So many other things, but we're going to look for a third person singular verb. But also, because we have this guy right here, we know that indicates that an optative or a subjunctive is going to be, that might be in the way, going to be coming up. So that we also have to keep that in our mind when we're looking for our verb. So because I've already parsed, we can see it's right here, and it means to show. But because it's optative, may show. So many other things may show. And then we're looking for our accusative, and our accusative we can see is right here. But it's also the participle down here. And the way I'm interpreting this is that Thucydides is using this participle as a noun, and the reason I believe this, we'll do that here. We'll do it in blue. The reason I believe this is because I think this adjective is an internal adjective, which means it modifies the verb. So many other things may show, and then this means to live one's life, so one's lifestyle. Many other things may show the lifestyle, the similar lifestyle, and then we have a comparison. The similar lifestyle between the ancient Greeks, the Greeks of old age, the ancient Greeks, and the barbarians now, the modern barbarians. So we get this. And many other things may show the similar lifestyles of the, or rather, maybe between the ancient and the barbarians of now, but we could use the nun as an adjective maybe, and the modern barbarians. So cool. That's it. And there we have it. We conquered the challenges before us, and dare I say, we completed our quest better than Jason and the Argonauts. I will say it. I think we did. A lot went wrong at the end of that myth. So before we part ways, let's put the pieces of our puzzle together and read a full translation of chapter 6. For all the Greeks were bearing arms, because the settlements were unprotected and communications to others were unsafe, and in this way of life they were bearing arms just like the barbarians. And the proof is that the Greeks are still maintaining themselves in this way, maintaining a custom which was once similar to all. The Athenians were the first among them who laid down their arms, and by giving up their way of living, they changed to more luxurious ways. And the wealthy elders among them, on account of the spread of delicate habits, recently stopped wearing linen tunics, and binding golden grasshopper ornaments to their heads. The Athenians laid down this fashion to the elders of Ionia, which prevailed for a long time. On the other hand, the Spartans were the first to use a modern dress, a dress which even now is modern, and the wealthy especially lived on an equal footing to the majority. They were the first who publicly stripped naked and prepared themselves with oil to train in gymnastics. Not long ago, contending athletes wore girdles around their privy parts in the Olympic Games, and it has not been much time since that they stopped this custom. Even now, this is done by the barbarians, especially those in Asia. When prizes of boxing and wrestling are given, they wear this girdle and do this custom. And many other things may show the similar lifestyles between the ancient Greeks and the modern barbarians.